Hello, and welcome to the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership's first quarterly webinar of 2024, Engaging Fathers as Parent Leaders. We want to thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation, and special thanks to the Pritzker Children's Initiative for their partnership. My name is Alicia Guevara Warren, and I have the privilege of serving as the Senior Director of Equity and Leadership for the Early Childhood Investment Corporation, which serves as the home for the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership. Before we get started, I want to share a bit of background on the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership. We were created in 2022 to help share capacity with early childhood leaders across the country to help embed family and parent leadership as the new way of doing our work. The center's work built on decades of experience that the Early Childhood Investment Corporation has with authentically engaging family leaders to inform and shape the early childhood system. We encourage you to visit our website for more information on how to connect with us and to find resources on embedding family and parent leadership. So we are so excited for today's webinar, which is focused on recruiting and engaging dads in our family leadership work, thinking about how we're supporting and embedding fathers to be at the decision-making table to help inform our early childhood system. So we have an awesome panel today that's going to talk about why this is an act of equity and share best practices and tools to support outreach and engagement with fathers. Before I get any further, I do want to introduce Marisela Rodriguez, who is serving as our Spanish interpreter today. Welcome, Marisela. We are going to be dropping some instructions if you'd like to listen to the webinar in Spanish in the chat box.
Buenas tardes a todos, bienvenidos a este seminario en línea. Se acaba de presentar Alicia Guevara, quien tiene el privilegio de desempeñarse como directora de equidad y liderazgo de Early Childhood Investment Corporation y su sede en el Centro Nacional de Formación de Líderes para Familias y Padres de Familia. Antes de continuar, quiere detenerse un momento y hacer la presentación del que vamos a tener interpretación simultánea. Entonces, las indicaciones son las siguientes. Si usted se está uniendo desde un computador, en un momento más va a haber un icono que es como el icono de un globo, y ahí por favor presione y seleccione interpretación y el idioma de su preferencia, sea inglés o español. Si usted se está uniendo desde un teléfono, oprima por favor los tres puntitos que dicen More, tóquelos y va a aparecer la opción de interpretación y elija por favor español. Voy a dar estas indicaciones ahora en inglés. So we will have simultaneous interpretation. So if you're joining from a computer, you will see an icon next to the all options that you have at the bottom of the screen. It's like kind of a globe icon. So select that icon and interpretation and then English. If you're joining from a phone or a tablet, please tap the three dots that it says more and select interpretation and English as well. And interpretation will be launched in a few seconds.
Okay. At this time, I want to introduce today's moderator, Jacob Penny Johnson, who is a trainer and consultant with the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership and is going to walk us through an engaging and awesome conversation today with our panel. And as we get started with this conversation, we're going to drop some kind of reflection questions for us to kind of think about as we're moving through the conversation today. So you'll see those here in a minute, but really thinking about the role of men and fathers in our society, the relationships we have with dads, in the way that it impacts the way we serve fathers in our work. So you'll see those here momentarily. And I'm going to turn it over to Jacob. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Alicia and Maricela. And greetings, everyone. My name is Jacob Penny Johnson, and like Alicia said, I serve as a consultant and trainer with the Early Childhood Investment Corporation's National Center for Family and Parent Leadership. I'm also the father of a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, and over the years, I've been involved in fatherhood programming through my local county's maternal and child health unit, and through a Michigan-based initiative called the Fatherhood Network. As a father, a parent leader, and someone who's been working in the early childhood sector for a few years, I'm very excited to be moderating today's webinar. I know that when we support fathers in being healthy and engaged and leaders, that our families, children in the early childhood sector and communities are better off. And so as Alicia mentioned, our webinar today is really to expand on how programs can better engage, recruit, and serve fathers, and how we can focus as practitioners and programs on supporting fathers as parent leaders specifically. And so as we get started, please note that we will be using the term dad, father, and male caregiver interchangeably today. And so I'd like to move on to introduce our panelists for today. Each one of our panelists has multiple years of experience working with fathers and being in the parent leadership space. You can find each one of their bios in the resource attachments. And so today we have with us Mr. Eric Viercy, the Chief Partner Success Officer with the National Fatherhood Initiative, Mr. Adornis, aka Bo Torres, co-founder with Padres Fuertes Initiative, and Mr. Kevin Lavender Jr., a parent leader and founder/executive director with the Fatherhood Network. And so I'd like to get our guests' voice into the space and ask them to answer the following question as an introduction. And so we'll start with Eric and then pass it on to Bo and Kevin. And so Eric, could you just share with us, maybe what is your why for focusing on the inclusions of dads in the early childhood sector or systems building?
Yeah, so it's great to be with everybody. My why is really focused around the fact that there are so many human service organizations that don't have many, if any, fathers participating in their programs and services. So my why, I get excited over the opportunity to come alongside partners around the country that are at the nexus of fathers and families and help raise awareness, help them implement policies, find funding, increase the number of fatherhood-specific types of programs, hiring male staff, really just ultimately helping them build capacity to better engage fathers into the programs and services that they already offer, particularly for parents. And so, that's really exciting. Of course, the vision is always to improve the well-being of children. But the way that I intersect with that is typically coming alongside with those organizations around the country that are looking to do better in engaging fathers.
Thanks, Eric, and shout out to the National Fatherhood Initiative. So glad to have you here with us today.
Thank you.
Mr. Bo, if you could share with us, what is your why for focusing on the inclusions of dads in the early childhood system?
Buenas tardes and good afternoon to everybody. Great to be here tonight, or this afternoon rather. The reason that we work in this space is to really amplify the voices of fathers in the infant mortality space. Strong Beginnings, Healthy Start, the Strong Fathers, Padres Fuertes project really wants to amplify that in the engagement of how we lower those numbers. For the Black and Latina community, those numbers are twice to 3 times as high as they are for the majority population. So we want to make sure that as we are building out projects, as we're looking at those structures that already are available, that we have that capacity for fathers to really be engaged in an authentic and honest way.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you for being here. And then we'll pass it on to Mr. Kevin Lavender Jr.
Good afternoon to everybody. Happy Friday Eve. Kevin Lavender Jr., Executive Director of the Fatherhood Network. My why is because fathers matter. It can be said that simple. Fatherhood and fatherlessness is at the intersection of a lot of disparities and or healthy outcomes for children. Also being a father of 3 beautiful daughters, it's close to my heart. And because when we have healthy, engaged fathers being actively engaged, our communities are better.
Yes, great. So happy to have y'all with us today. And so thank you, fellas, again for your work and for being here with us today. And so really just want to get right into our discussion portion of today. We realize that there are many different aspects that we could be addressing and discussing today as it relates to engaging and recruiting dads as parent leaders. And with just under an hour, we will not be able to cover it all. So we thought it would be beneficial for our audience to hear directly from you as panelists and experts in the field of fatherhood. And so we have a few questions that we've lined up for you all that I'll ask in a round robin order. And we do hope to have a few minutes for question and answers at the end of this conversation. And so would like to encourage our audience members to drop questions or comments in the chat as we move along. And we'll hope to address some of those here in this webinar, and we'll definitely follow up with the resource document as well. And so we're going to get right into it. And I want to start with Kevin on this question. And so the first question that we have for you all as panelists is, how do you see engaging fathers as an act of equity and inclusion? And so Kevin, I want to start with you on that, and then we'll pass it to Eric. How do you see engaging fathers as an act of equity and inclusion?
Good question. I will simply put it, so equity, the act of being impartial, right? Being fair, inclusion, not excluding any of the voices that should be at the table that are connected to the matter. In this case, the matter being the child. I think it would be unfair, inequitable, and not inclusive to not engage fathers, because a father is a key component of the well-being and the existence of the child. I think far too often through mass media, through systemic and institutional practices, some that were mentioned earlier by Eric, fathers are not being engaged. In many ways, they're being marginalized, peripheralized. And so we're in the work, Eric Bowe and others, Jacob, to make sure and ensure that all of the voices that matter as it pertains to the outcomes of the child are heard, are vetted, are affirmed, are assessed, because the child matters.
Thank you for that, Kevin. We'll pass it right on to Eric.
Yeah, so, just building off of what I said in my introduction, when I am delivering workshops and trainings around the country, I have a poll question in there where I will ask them different percentages of approximately how many, dads they have versus moms. And oftentimes, in fact, more often than not, most of the social service organizations say that they have less than 10 or 5% of dads engaged in their programs and services for parents. And so the way that I typically bridge them, even before I start to talk about father friendliness at all, is I'll ask them, how parentally balanced are your programs and services? And it really does come down to that equity base, because oftentimes I will see kind of like the deer in the headlights, or sometimes the light bulb go on to say, oh, there must be an issue here if we have these programs and services where dads are certainly open and they're accessible to, but yet, we only have 5 or 10%, and some maybe even less than that, of dads engaging. We must, I guess, have to do something a little different. And so that's typically the catalyst, the bridge that I create in order to help them see, maybe to break that paradigm of what they've been trying to do, or the way that they've been operating hasn't been working. And so when they realize that they have to be more intentional to get dads involved into some of these programs and services, that typically begins to move that needle towards, more equity in terms of moms and dads engaging in those programs and services. And again, so that's another area that excites me, because it does, as a result, as these organizations become more father inclusive, children and family outcomes are improved.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Eric. And again, shout out to the National Fatherhood Initiative. And I know you have a lot of great resources that you'll be sharing with us too. Mr. Bowe, your thoughts on how do you see engaging fathers as an act of equity and inclusion?
So when we talk about those two things, we're really talking about belonging. And when we look at Black fathers, when we look at Latina fathers, when we look at fathers in general, fathers have been removed from that sense of belonging in their child's life. And when we see that as engaging in spaces that have been built systematically to exclude the father as a continuation of that historical context, that's where we have to make sure that fathers feel like they belong fully. Historically, a really quick story, we were having a dad's cafe, and one of the dads brought up the term inlak esh alakin, right? It is a Mayan sense of law that I am another yourself. So as we're having the conversation and we're creating those senses of belonging, how does the child fit into these spaces that we're creating for the father long term?
Thank you. Thank you for that, fellas. And so I want to follow up with another question, and Bo, we'll start with you on this. So thinking about fathers as parent leaders, right? And so that's really the focus that we want to kind of glean on today. What are some examples of the impact that you've seen when fathers are engaged as parent leaders in the early childhood systems level work? And so, Bo, if we could start with you on that and move on to Kevin, what are some examples that you've seen?
So we work really strongly in creating community action consortiums as one of the 101 Healthy Start sites here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Through that, we get to work with organizations like the Kent School Services Network. We have the Dads Count Coalition of Kent County that is housed at the Kent County Health Department. In being able to be conduits of conversation and communication, bringing fathers in to give their real life experiences. We're working to make sure that no door is left closed for those fathers. So as we're building new systems and tearing down old ones, we have to make sure that we are assuring those spaces, right? When we are having conversations at, for example, the Early Childhood Center here in an area called Godfrey Lee, making sure that those fathers are available, making sure that we're making it a space for them to feel comfortable, again, to belong, but to have that voice and uplift their children's needs in literacy, in food security, and in all of those other social determinants that we work with.
Thank you, Bo. Thank you. And so we'll move it on to Kevin next. And Kevin, I personally know that you have had a lot of experience in the parent leadership space and also mobilizing other fathers in your community and across the state. Can you share with us a couple of examples of the impact you've seen when fathers are engaged as parent leaders?
Absolutely. And thanks for that response, Bo. I do believe in the constant pursuit of kind of like amalgamating a critical mass to continue to equip, inspire, and inform fathers, right? Each one teach one. I can draw from my own experiences, my daughters, that it's a game changer when you show up to parent-teacher conferences as a father with your notepad and your notebook and your questions. As the youth say, it hits different, right? It demonstrates an intentionality that this child, this precious baby right here, there's a support system, a village, and it changes the posture of the educators because oftentimes I think many are not used to that. So I can just say from my own experience, from preschool on, just understanding the vitality of like learning and knowing the different stages of development of my children, and then also rallying around the resource to provide the support needed as they scaffold up throughout the years. And that's the work that we are in the business of doing with the Fatherhood Network, just educating fathers on, number one, your voice matters. Number two, you don't have to know everything for your voice to matter, right? Like this is your child, right? Your responsibility. And so the good with the bad that comes with that, you should be in the know, Dad. You can give your opinion even if you have no opinion. I would say we've helped empower fathers to get involved in like serving breakfast in the school before class starts, in volunteering at recess, and being a volunteer in the after school program if that's provided, and being a Girls on the Run coach, like just getting involved in the activities and the spaces where your child or children are along the way. It's not something where as a father you should be voluntold what to do about your child. No, you can actually set the tone. And I think that's critical for dads to understand because it really kind of galvanizes them to get more of a proactive posture than a reactive posture more times than not. Sometimes, yeah, things you may be reacting to certain things, but If the mindset is, I'm going to set the tone, I'm going to research, find out, meet the principals, teachers, et cetera, the outcomes for the child are just much better, as Eric alluded to earlier.
Thanks, Kevin. We'll pass it on to Eric here. I just want to add in, and just because I've had an opportunity to work close with Kevin Lavender Jr. in the Fatherhood Network, that I know a big part of his work also has been mobilizing other fathers. And so showing up at our local kind of city level in advocating for policy change and proclamations around the support of fathers on a local level, and also advocating for other programming too. And so shout out to you and the Fatherhood Network for all of that great work. Eric, your thoughts. I know you have a interesting vantage point working on a nationwide level. And so can you share with us maybe some examples that you've seen around the impact of when fathers are engaged as parent leaders in the early childhood system?
Sure. Yeah. And again, I think it's more from a cultural perspective within these organizations, because, you know, parent leaders who are fathers have a tremendous impact on the culture of that organization. You know, I think that the single most important factor to raise an organization's father friendliness and is just that dads will see other dads engaged in those programs and services, or that those dads who are in those programs and services, when they intersect with other dads out in the community or in their sphere of influence, that they're able to connect those dads to those programs and services. And so it really creates that momentum for an increase in father friendliness. And oftentimes, and many of you know this, that when dads see that word parent, oftentimes they will see that as a code word for mom. They may think, and it could be off base, but it could be accurate, that they may be the only dad or male that's going to show up to that program and service. So, you know, when dads are engaged as parent leaders, it begins to, you know, I think it just lends itself and breeds more dads and creates an area of comfort and a safer environment for dads to also become involved in those and ultimately become parent leaders themselves. And, you know, when they see that, and even for other employees, it sends that clear message that fathers are irreplaceable, that they do provide an irreplaceable role to the parenting process. And that's ultimately what we want to communicate, is that those services are for them too. So having those dads as parent leaders engaged in that, I think is just a tremendous piece of the puzzle in increasing that father friendliness, ultimately getting more dads engaged.
Hey, thank you, fellas. Thank you for sharing. And it is clear. And Eric, I know you've been in the work or the field of fatherhood for the past 20 years. And so we've had conversations just around the current state of the early childhood sector and fathers' kind of place in the space. And so it is apparent that we're at kind of a turning point around the importance of healthy, engaged fathers, but also going beyond this idea of just healthy, responsible fathers. We're really seeing fathers as leaders and as systems change agents. And so, really kind of want to focus on that aspect of engaging fathers, right? That we're not just talking about supporting dads and changing diapers and showing up to the PTO meeting and the conferences, but we're talking about supporting fathers and changing systems, and specifically the early childhood systems, because as all of you said, the ripple effect on mom, on childhood outcomes is just so great that we have to acknowledge the value of healthy, engaged fathers. And so want to move us on a little bit, and want to start this next question with Bo. And so, Bo, can you share maybe a best practice that you have used for reaching and engaging fathers as parent leaders?
We have we have a newsletter here that we do locally, but we have a section in it called Beauty and Fatherhood. And that Beauty and Fatherhood piece gives the father a chance to talk about himself, And how many times when we've been in schools or we've been in systems or we've been in communities, have we had the chance to truly amplify our own voice, right? To look internally and say, how have I gone through all of those issues and how will I be able to engage in the future? And I think that's very special. A lot of times we'll see publications and the ideation behind creating that piece was for a time there for about 2 to 3 years. I would see the same dad reading the same book to the same two babies, and it looked like that was the only image that a lot of our programs were using. So to be able to amplify that and to give them that voice that they already have intrinsically, to be able to amplify that then gives us the opportunity to say, okay, well, how do you feel about this specific issue, right? We work really strongly on housing, workforce development, making sure that dads have transportation, that they are, if they don't have access to education, that we have that. And then that social network development, really doing those five through that piece gives them the chance to say, well, how do you feel about these different things once they feel comfortable and they feel authentic in their ability to express. Once you have that, we can have our fathers in any space that we talk about really feel comfortable and speak honestly.
Thank you, Bo. Kevin, I'm going to pass that same question on to you next. Can you share a best practice that you have used for reaching and engaging fathers as parent leaders?
Yes, Bo, just to let you know, I did write that down. Authentic in their ability to express. I like that. That really captures, yeah, because once that happens, then the curtain is pulled back and it's all to the good. I would say for the Fatherhood Network, we use our Dad Cafe spaces. So really finding spaces where men and fathers are willing to be vulnerable. A couple of those spaces we found is in our dad cafes, in our barbershop talks, and many times in our wellness check-ins. Um, like, how do you feel? First of all, how many children do you have? What are the ages? What has been their experience in education? We usually start with that. But also just bringing in resources, right, that can help equip the father along his journey as a parent with a child being educated outside the home. Oftentimes in those conversations, you find new resources, you find out some assumptions, some presuppositions that need to be demystified, and then oftentimes thoughts and feelings that are affirming. And I'm so glad that I came into the understanding of the 5 protective factors. I have to shout out our friends at Great Star Collaborative in Kalamazoo are really for educating me on that. And just one of those being concrete supports in times of need, and another one being social connections. And what we're finding is through our engagement of fathers is that the vitality of social connections can really download and empower in the father the things he needs to be equipped to do the work, right? To kind of overcome those fears of engaging, overcoming thinking that the word parent automatically means mom. I think it's just important. But then finally, also just seeing other fathers modeling the behavior, I think is key. Is key. It's not only encouraging but affirming for many of the dads. And so I think over time in Kalamazoo County, especially, we should see more fathers getting involved throughout the educational pipeline and key points, because this is certainly an issue we cannot let go.
Thank you, Kev. And I just want to add in real quick, and then we'll move Derek. And this is just because I've had the opportunity to work alongside Mr. Kevin Lavender Jr. a little bit. And to your point around concrete support in times of need and modeling. And so one thing that I've seen you do also is incorporate in dad cafes, in dad meetings, advocacy around what fatherhood program can look like on a local level. And so I've appreciated that in addition to talking about supporting each other as men and fathers, social emotional growth of our children, that we're also talking about our local landscape of fatherhood and support needs, and giving opportunity for fathers to voice their opinions and thoughts, and then doing something with that. And so I just want to acknowledge you and your work within Kalamazoo County to establish a proclamation for fathers on a local level. And I know that that was through some of your mobilizing with fathers, in addition to giving them the support they need to show up as healthy dads, but also supporting them as leaders. And so just want to give you a shout out for all of your great work in mobilizing other fathers as well. And so, Eric, want to pass it on to you with that same question. Best practices that you use for reaching and engaging fathers as parent leaders. And I know we'll follow up with some resources, but anything that you'd love to share?
Yeah, and I want to dovetail, Kevin, and thank you for bringing up the 5 protective factors, and Jacob for highlighting that even further, because that's one thing that I've actually been doing a lot of presentations on is the 5 protective factors, but through the lens of fatherhood. Like some of those elements of those 5 protective factors are universal, whether you're mom or dad, but there are some nuances to those 5 protective factors on how fathers address those maybe in a slightly different way than moms do. And so we have a free guide that actually is engaging dads in those 5 protective factors that you can get download right off of our website at fatherhood.org. So I wanted to mention that as well. One of the other best practices that we encourage and equip our partner organizations to do is to implement an alumni program for dads who have gone through any of their programs and services. And it really helps dads to stay connected to the program long after the program ends or whatever service they were, engaged in. And it really, I guess it helps in a lot of powerful ways in terms of getting more momentum again for the programs and services, because they become the ambassadors for the program. They become the recruiters. There's nothing more powerful than word of mouth, right? So these dads who have gone through your programs and services, if you can create a more formal way to keep them engaged afterwards, can be really powerful. It also, sometimes what happens is these dads become co-facilitators of the program. They will, become mentors. They'll mentor other dads in the community or connected to your organization. They'll represent that program or that organization in the community, doing community service types of things. Some do public speaking. And so this is another area that we believe so much in, that we, Jacob, to your point, we have a free resource. It's a free guide on how to do this. We have case studies in there. We have a step-by-step process that you can customize to, wherever you may be in that. But creating alumni programs can be a really powerful best practice as you are engaging more fathers, just again, to continue that momentum and continue to help you build capacity when it comes to engaging fathers.
Thank you for that, fellas. And just for our audience members, we will make sure to be sharing out the resources that Eric mentioned, and also the website for the National Fatherhood Initiative, which has a whole heap of great resources around how you can engage and support fathers. And so want to move on to the next question. I want to stay with you, Eric. And so thinking about engaging fathers, recruiting fathers, what can you share about specific language? And so you started to go there a little bit earlier around sometimes when we see the word family, there's a certain image that comes to mind. What can you share with us about what specific language, maybe for working dads, is important when we think about recruiting and engaging fathers as parent leaders? And we'll pass it to Bo after this.
Yes, as far as language in general, I would root it in some research that we did a number of years ago. We actually did a large-scale national survey of fathers' attitudes about fathering. And one of the things that came out, frankly, that surprised us at NFI was that 58% of all dads believe that they could be easily replaced by another man in the life of their children. So there's a lot of men walking around thinking that they're nice but not necessary, and that other people can kind of fill the gap if for some reason, they believe that either they can't be the best dad that they can be, or that there's too many hurdles in the way to do that. And what kind of coining it as this replaceability factor, it goes right to the motivation of a dad wanting to be the best dad that he can be, because again, if he thinks he's replaceable, it's that much easier maybe to kind of take a step back or let those other people, fill the gap. And so any language around helping them to understand that they do bring that unique and irreplaceable role to the life of their children can be a very powerful motivating engine for dads to take that first step, first of all, to think, are there ways I can build my fathering skills? And once they start to take that step, it opens up a lot of other doors, because once they see that they can build their fathering skills, and that no matter where they are in the current relationship with the mom of the child and the child, that if they are working on themselves and they're working on things that they can control, they're going to increase the probability that at some point they're going to be more connected or more involved or more engaged or have more access to their children. And so any language that we can put out there that would help them understand, no, you do bring a unique and irreplaceable role to the life of your children and your family, that can fuel a lot of other things. So how we do that, through the communication and the marketing of what we do, the raising the awareness, training staff around these types of things. Again, because a lot of human service organizations are primarily staffed by women, sometimes we need to be cognizant of that as well, and make sure that we're incorporating some awareness and staff training and preparation, so that the female staff are as comfortable working with men and dads as possible.
Thank you for that, Eric. Thank you. That was a lot. I'm going to pass it right on to Bo. And Bo, if you can share anything that you specifically think about in terms of language for fathers that you serve or help mobilize. And I know you have a kind of a specific niche where you are supporting bilingual fathers as well in families.
Correct. So the way that I put it, or the way that I phrase it, whatever language they want. So the dad is the leader. When we walk into a home, one of the first things that, and I have to mention Jose Santoyo, who is one of our community health workers, and Joel Rogers, who is our other community health worker that's working specifically with fathers. But it's whatever engages the dad. If we have fathers generationally that speak better when you're talking about video games, that's the language we're going with. What is the role of a father in some of these video games? If we have fathers that are really into sports, we go into sports, but we can't use a we know better approach. It's whatever language the father wants. When it comes about cultural sensitivities, we're bilingual. Nosotros hablamos español, nosotros tenemos acceso al lenguaje. I love the fact that we have interpretation today, right? So we have that access to language. We have that capacity, and we have, again, the community, right? Fathers as leaders in community, making sure that we lean in. The story that I told earlier about indigenous language or indigeneity, making sure that that's a piece and a part to the work that we do. We have a high concentration of African immigration coming into the west side of Michigan, so making sure that we have language accessibility for those fathers. But it's whatever language will drive, whatever the language will be, and whatever we can learn from them as the catalyst to that language that we're accessing, whether it be cultural, whether it be social, what have you.
Yes, thank you both. Thank you. And I want to pass it on to Mr. Lavender Jr. here and kind of keep it on the same accord. And so, Kevin, I know that the Fatherhood Network serves all fathers and doesn't exclude any fathers, but I also know that there has been a heavy emphasis on African-American fathers. And so similarly to that same kind of accord, what can you share about specific language when working with dads and maybe specifically African-American fathers?
Great question. A couple words that came to mind that I wrote down: resilience, self-efficacy, just do it, and paternal duty. I'm gonna emphasize the paternal duty piece. It's vital, it's imperative that our Black fathers understand that their paternal duty has been under assault since the inception of this country. In fact, the very manifestation of any expression of paternal duty was seen as an act of rebellion. And so I and my team, we try to let the Black fathers know, when you change a diaper, when you go to a parent-teacher conference, When you say, yes, you can do that, no, you can't do that. Hey, I have a question about my child's grades. That's an act of revolution, because the foundation identify those things as acts of rebellion. So they need to understand that not only do you matter, you should matter, and you should get involved. It's just that simple. So Black fathers need to understand that. I say sometimes there's like a triple whammy against Black fathers, or like a three-pronged kind of resistance, where they're already assuming that they're going to be ignored. They're already assuming that they're not going to be acknowledged. And then they're already assuming that none of their stuff is going to be validated when they choose to express whatever their perspective is about their children. And so we just kind of process like the uncomfortable feeling that is, but to stay resilient and engaging nevertheless, simply because your child needs it, it matters and they need it, but also just from a historical standpoint, that there have been intentional, systemic, institutionalized impediments that have been laid to like block that expression of paternal duty.
Wow. Wow. Thank you, fellas. You said a lot right there. And so I just want to like mic drop from there, but thank you, fellas. And now just follow up as we kind of end things out here, and we'll wrap up with a few more questions. That is so important that we challenge ourselves around the narrative of engaged fathers, and everything you just said, Kevin. That data oftentimes can prove us wrong in terms of who's showing up in children's lives and how often. And so it's just important that we constantly challenge ourselves and what we've been socialized to think around fatherhood, and specifically Black and brown fathers. And so we'll move on. We've got one more question here, and if we have time, we'll address the question or two from the chat as we kind of close out. And so again, just want to thank you, fellas, for your work and for sharing with us here today. And so I want to start with Bo on this next question. Resources. So what are some available resources or strategies for today's participants that can be used to assess where we are in engaging dads as parent leaders and support our planning efforts? I know that was kind of a two-part, but what are some available resources or strategies that can help us assess where we're at in engaging dads and support our planning efforts?
Yeah, so asking the questions, right? Our project and our program is always based on how do we use what is missing in the lives of our participants. So asking those questions, making sure that we have established loops of information that are going to be constant, that we know that once we ask the questions, those questions are then going to be answered, passed back to the fathers, passed back to the families, and implemented, and that they are a part of that implementation at each and every part. If we see concentrations of a specific nationality or group that we have in the community, addressing that right away. So that's one of the things. In long-term planning and approaches, when we're utilizing any sort of framework like an A3 or a strategic plan, making sure that we are compensating our fathers, making sure that we're paying them for their voices, making sure that we are feeding our families when they come, making sure that we provide that childcare that is so crucial so that they maintain that engagement. But those are the ways: asking, implementing, having a loop of information and communication so that no one is ever asking, oh, what happened to that question that I asked? Or what happened to that focus group that I was a part of? And in that way, we assure that the next time, and we're paying our fathers for their time, for their intellect, and for their voices, that we make sure that we have that availability.
Woo, thank you, Bo. Thank you. I just want to repeat, you said feedback loops, and you said pay fathers for their intellectual time given. And that's parent leaders in general, right? When we're asking parent leaders to show up, let's compensate them for their time and value. Thank you. Kevin, passing around to you that same question.
I really don't have much else to add because Bo touched on something that's near and dear to my heart, which is let's pay the men. Like, let's have a small token of a thank you, and that your presence and your perspective matters and is valuable. And without it, we would be less informed. Okay. Without it, we would be less enlightened. But with it, it empowers all that are willing to listen with more insight to do the work better. So I mean, that's the best that I can add on top of that. I think that in general, NFI has had great resources. I like to shout out the Michigan Law Library. I like to shout out all of the public libraries for the resources that are available, the free literature, the workshops, you know, tremendous that have helped and aided me in my own journey when it comes down to custody and parenting time and et cetera, et cetera. Um, I would also like to thank those school leaders who have a lens of equity, who are willing to have conversations, those principals, assistant principals, those teachers that are on the front line that see the disparities. It's in plain sight. They see the inequities and that are like, hey, do we have anybody in the community that does this? How come we don't have that? I mean, all of that, all of those involved in that ecosystem to me are resources.
Thank you for that. And Eric, we'll just pass it right on to you. And I'm asking the same question about resources and support, knowing that literally your job and the National Fatherhood Initiative's job is to produce those. But same question to you. Anything that you'd like to highlight for our audience members today? And knowing that
Sure.
we will share some follow-up resources also.
Yeah, absolutely. And these are all free resources. So who doesn't love free resources, right? All can be found at thatfatherhood.org. But I would recommend downloading the free father-friendly checkup assessment. That's something that you can download. There's 4 assessment categories that you can assess your organization, your agency, whatever that may be. On the father friendliness. And what's cool about it is you can then look at the responses, and that can inform a father friendly action plan that will include no or low, very low cost type of things that you could do to better engage fathers. I did mention the alumni guide. That's also in there for free. And there's also a guide to mentoring fathers, which is another great resource, I think, for when we think about trying to raise up parent leaders in this particular setting. And then there's one other resource that we actually just released within the last couple of months, and it's called the Stages of Father Inclusion videos. And again, this can all be found very easily on the website. But there are 5 different stages of father inclusion, and you can take a look at where you think you are. And there's a video for each of those stages. And on that page, there are additional free resources to help you in that stage, but also to move you to some of the other stages of father inclusion. So those are some great places to start with if you're looking for some things that could make some cultural systemic changes within the setting in which you're serving fathers and parent leaders. And there's a lot also on there, but I think those would be really some good places to start.
Thank you, fellas. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You have shared a lot of great insight with us. And again, just want to assure the audience that we will be following up with a Q&A resource document, addressing some questions from the chat that we didn't get to, and then also sharing some of these resources that were referenced. Thank you. Thank you all. And I have some thoughts, but I want to address some of the questions, or at least one of the questions that came up in the chat as we kind of close out. And so, again, thank you everyone for your comments and questions. And so want to put this out there. And if Eric, Kevin, Bo, you have a thought, that'd be great if you kind of address this question. And so one of the issues that I noticed is that a lot of jobs are not pro-fatherhood, which makes it hard for a father to be as involved. So how does a father approach his boss or work environment to be supportive? And so that was a question from the chat. That one of the issues that folks notice is that a lot of jobs are not pro-fatherhood, which can make it hard for fathers to show up and be involved as parent leaders and in programming. So how does a father approach his boss or work environment to be supportive? Any thoughts on that or experience?
So again, understanding that we're part of a medical system, we're part of a health system, so we have HIPAA requirements and all that stuff. But making sure that we ask the father if we can be that support in their workspace as well. So to everything that Kevin said, utilizing my privilege as a part of this team, making sure that I go into those spaces that may not feel safe, that may not feel approachable to a father when he's talking about his job, his work fair. I can't get to this event because of I can't get the time off, or I can't get to this, dad's cafe, or this whatever the event may be, making sure that we can access and we can amplify and we can say, this dad is doing an amazing job. He's part of our team. He's doing this work. And that extends out to any issues that may happen. We have a great relationship here locally with Friend of the Court, and making sure that we're in those spaces as well, right? It is our duty to be there from zero until whatever phase our programmatic offering affords that father. So the earlier that we can address, the earlier that we can achieve that amplification of that support, we do that. And it's not just a home visiting program, but as we're building this connection to the community as a whole, and amplifying the fathers as those leaders, making sure that we're there for them however they may need us in their workspace, in community, what have you.
Yeah, and it is, so much of it is helping businesses and employers to become more father friendly as well, right? Now, how we approach that is got to be from language that they're going to understand. And so there is research out there that shows if we can help fathers balance work-life balance issues better, that there are less call-offs, less sick days, increased productivity. And so what we do at NFI, we do have a broader, we call it a community mobilization approach, and we typically work with a lead agency in a community to engage all sectors around father engagement. And so there's always the known suspects in communities that are doing the lion's share of the family enrichment types of programs and support, your nonprofits, maybe faith-based, a little bit of government, maybe, but what about the business sector, right? What are we doing to help engage them? One of our partners actually out in Iowa that went through this community mobilization approach created a father-friendly business assessment that if they deemed local businesses father-friendly, they were able to promote that as businesses. And they had like logos that I'm a father-friendly business that they would put on their website and in the windows of if they have a brick and mortar, which was really quite cool. Because a lot of it is, again, about educating. It's about societal norms, changing these societal norms that oftentimes employers aren't that father-friendly towards their fathers in a variety of different ways. And so, yeah, I think what Bo mentioned to kind of help, I guess, advocate for the dad directly and help him advocate for himself, but also combining that with what can we do as leaders, as organizations, to help raise awareness of why businesses should be more father-friendly.
Yeah, that is great. That is great. Thank you, Bo and Eric. And we're going to close out. Kevin, did you want to check any final words or anything you wanted to add to that as we kind of close things out?
Yeah, I know we're running out of time. I just want to say I think Bo and Eric really demonstrated how much of a macro to micro level work this is going to require. It requires, and how much advocacy and also just how imperative it is for our organizations to do what we do. Looking at the business sector, one of the elements of Business 101 is your most vital resource in any business is not the money, it's your human resources. So in that context, maybe talking to the business owner just about, hey, if you want a fully present, fully productive father in your business organization, I know Bo was touching on this. Hey, how about maybe re-examine some of your policies around time off and so forth. So I just think that that's going to continue to be a need in conversation. And I think over the next decade, we will see some huge transformation, particularly in the workplace. And I think much of COVID has kind of helped pronounce some of that as well. But I think we're going to see some movement on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, fellas. Thank you, thank you, thank you. You all have shared a lot of great insight with us. And I just want to echo Kevin, what you just said, that I think we are at a turning point, and we should expect that we will see a lot more focus on fatherhood in the business sector, on a statewide policy level. I know right here in Michigan, a few of us are engaged in some of the work to hopefully establish a fatherhood commission. And so just want to encourage all of us to continue to do our best to support and engage fathers, understand the ripple effects on childhood outcomes in mom, right? Whole family and communities, that there's a ripple effect when we support fathers being healthy and engaged. And so for the questions that we didn't get to in the chat, we will follow up with a resource document. We do want to encourage folks as we close out to please fill out our feedback survey. We would love to hear your thoughts. And as we close out, we do want to share a quick kind of public service announcement or commercial about the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership's website. But on behalf of the Early Childhood Investment Corporation and the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership, I want to thank you all for attending. Another special thanks to our panelists, Eric, Bo, and Kevin, and to the Pritzker Children's Initiative for supporting this awesome work. Thank you. And please stay tuned for this video.
The Early Childhood Investment Corporation is thrilled to share that the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership's new website, parentleadership.org, is now live. Parentleadership.org is a launching pad for states, organizations, communities, and other early childhood systems leaders to embed equity-focused family and parent leadership as their new way of operating. Our new website welcomes you to the table by sharing important core beliefs and practices essential to equity-focused work. You'll find an array of capacity sharing opportunities, a library of webinars featuring top early childhood experts, advocates, and parent leaders, and digital resources on best practices for embedding family and parent leadership. Learn more about the National Center for Family and Parent Leadership by visiting parentleadership.org today.